Hi, I'm Roberta and I'm very excited to be here today with my good friend Joshi from Nilgiri's restaurant, in Nilgiri's restaurant. Thank you for having us here, Ajoy.
Thanks for having me, Roberta. Thank you.
I'm really excited to learn more about Indian food from you. I have to admit, it's not a cuisine I know a lot about. And if we're going to tell our cooks about a few fundamentals for Indian food, what do you think are the basics? What do we need to know?
Okay, let's start from the base. I would say it's important that the medium that you use for cooking, right, should be at a temperature where it is not cold, it is not too hot.
Okay.
Right, because that really makes easy for the oil to surface. If you're starting off in cold oil, it will take a very long time to surface.
Why do we want the oil to surface?
Right, we want the oil to surface for two reasons. By making sure the oil surfaces, you're actually cooking off the moisture.
Of course.
Oil will not surface unless there's moisture.
Yes.
It'll stay there. So the idea is to cook the moisture off and get the oil on the surface. Getting the oil on the surface also tells you a couple of things. It tells you that the dish is completely cooked,
right.
Number one. Dish is ready to be preserved, which means don't eat it today, no problems.
Right.
Eat it a few days later because that oil on the surface will preserve the dish. It's like pickling.
There's always a reason behind the things we do. We
Absolutely.
do them now because we like the flavour, but
Correct.
once they were done for a practical reason, weren't
Precisely. When you didn't have refrigerators, how do you
Right.
preserve it? So get that oil on the surface. And don't panic about this oil thing. This oil is greasy. Indian food is rich,
they? Yes.
but not greasy.
No.
Right? That's one very important thing one needs to understand. And when it is rich, you will always find that oil on the surface. It's not grease, for heaven's sake. It is that oil which we have used to cook. Some of the oil has come from the protein that we have used,
Yes.
but all of it put together makes that Rogan that we call Rogan Josh, that red oil on the surface. People panic with this red oil. I love it because it tells me the dish is fully cooked.
I love it too.
You
'Cause
don't
it
have
tastes
to eat
good.
it. You can eat it if you want. You don't have to eat it. Skim it off.
Right.
But if the oil is not on the surface, it is inside the dish,
It's there somewhere.
which means you have no choice but to eat it. That's when Indian food becomes greasy and heavy.
Right.
Right? So and I do this all the time. People take it away and say it's full of oil. If that oil is not on the surface, you are eating the oil. You have a choice here.
Makes perfect
Skim
sense.
it off, skim it off. But if that oil wasn't there, the dish is not ready. But
There
anyway,
is
that's
no
number one.
choice.
Number two, when cooking with onions and you want them caramelized, first of all, don't use this vigorous technique of grinding the onions, making sure they stir them. Gradual process, consistent heat,
Patience.
and add salt right in the beginning.
Right.
The moment you add salt in the beginning, salt has a tendency to draw out the moisture from inside the onion, which means the onion is cooking from inside out,
Okay.
not just the surface. So when that happens, your caramelization time is cut down by maybe 1/3, could be half, but it is still cut down.
So that salt is important, not just for flavour, but
Correct.
to draw the moisture out of
Correct.
the onions.
Correct. Very important. So you then get a good caramelized onion without the crunch.
And this caramelised onion, this seems to be fundamental in so many of the Indian dishes.
In pretty much every cuisine that uses onions, they will cook the onion through till the moisture disappears.
Till it's golden.
In some cases golden, in some cases not. Having said that, making sure the moisture comes out is probably indicated by the color, in some cases not.
Right.
So you're getting the flavor, that caramelized smell you get,
Yes.
the sugar smell.
So the wafting, the
Correct,
aroma.
correct, the wafting, and that's what I'm going to come to next. That after you add the salt and you cook your onions, make sure you waft before you taste. And wafting to me is telling me where I'm going,
Right.
because I can't taste. Like in French and Italian cooking, you taste as you go. Indian food, you can't taste as you go, because if you do that, the material that you're cooking with is raw.
Right. The balance is.
The balance.
Right.
And if you do that consistently and constantly, by the time the dish is cooked, the palate goes to sleep. It goes completely numb.
Right.
You can't taste anything. So taste, no. Waft, absolutely.
Okay. So we rely on our nose
Very
more
important.
than our
More than a
taste.
taste
Okay.
till the end.
Yes.
And as you keep wafting, you will see that the caramelization happens with the onions. Then you add the ginger. Cook the ginger till you get that caramelized ginger smell.
Right.
garlic,
Then
and
in
so
goes
on
the
and so
garlic.
forth. Then garlic. In most cases, ginger first, garlic later. In some cases with red meat, garlic first, ginger later.
Right. So
Right?
ginger for sweetness.
Yes.
And garlic
for
for
bitterness.
bitterness.
But
okay.
that bitterness is not the taste. The bitterness is in the background. It's that
Yes.
it helps the onions, ginger, garlic, and everything else come
It
together.
all marries.
Correct.
Now, talk to me about spicing, because spices are so essential in any Indian dish.
Okay, I say spicy is different to chili, and don't get me wrong. People do think I'm acting a bit smart, but I'm just telling you what I believe in and what I know. My knowledge tells me that spiciness is what spices do.
There are many spices
Correct.
that aren't hot
Correct.
or pungent,
Correct.
right?
Pepper may be one exception, but
Yes.
most clove probably another. But there are 100 odd spices that really don't add any chili or any pungency to the dish.
So Indian food can be spicy without being hot.
Correct. And this is what I tell people sometimes. My food is spicy without being chili hot.
Yes.
If it is hot, it could be temperature hot,
Right.
right? Not chili.
And when we buy spices, are there any tips for buying spices?
I prefer to buy them whole,
Right.
right? Because spices contain volatile oils. It's like coffee bean.
Yes.
If you're a coffee lover, you would never buy ground coffee.
Right.
You will buy whole
Because
seed.
the oil can evaporate, can
Oxidize.
go rancid.
Correct.
Okay.
What happens to coffee happens to the spices.
Of course.
And if you buy ground spices and you use them, mind you, you use them because the recipe is saying, but you try and understand the logic behind why you should use freshly ground spices versus buying them ground. Buying them ground and adding them to the dish is like adding sawdust.
It can be counted. And you can smell that on
Correct.
some ground
Correct.
spices.
Correct.
So we buy the spices whole and then we either pound them or
Grind
we
them.
get lazy and use an electric
I have no
spice
issue.
grinder.
If you're using electric spicer, use it for now. As in,
Yes.
grind it now
Grind
and
what
use
you
it
need.
right away. Because electric blenders do generate heat.
Of course.
Stone
yes.
does not.
That's
That's a big difference.
Right.
Right? That's why we use stone, because it brings out the oils without cooking the spice.
Of course. There's
So-
so much. Now, some spices are ground, and turmeric comes to mind.
I buy turmeric ground because grinding turmeric is a complex process.
Right.
You have to sun dry it. You have to make sure you get the curcumin, which is the coloring agent, just right. It's
So we
very-
don't want to do that.
You don't
So-
want to do that.
Turmeric and chili powder,
Chili powder, a lot of people grind it.
garam masala.
Okay, I'll come to garam masala later.
Okay.
But chili powder, I prefer you buy it ground, because if you grind it at home, you'd be the sole survivor in that house.
Okay.
Even your
Get
dog,
you in the back of the
even
truck.
your dog will disown you.
Okay. So turmeric we buy, chili powder we buy. So garam masala.
Yes.
We've talked about the fact that we get turmeric ground, we get chili ground, and we'll come back to turmeric in a minute. Garam masala, we normally see that ground as well, but we should buy it in small quantities,
Always.
I expect.
Always, if you're
That
buying,
would be true of all spices, wouldn't it?
correct. And if you, it's like coffee again. If you're buying ground coffee, you buy them in small sachets.
Yes.
And if you can't use it the whole lot at a time, airtight container into the fridge.
Okay.
That's the best way to preserve it. But try and finish it off at the earliest, because it doesn't tell you how much is its shelf life.
No.
But if you want the best of it, try and use it at the earliest.
Fresh. Fresh is best.
Correct.
Now, turmeric. You said turmeric's one of your favorite spices. It's an interesting one. Tell me about turmeric.
It is one of my favorites in all my classes. It takes top priority.
Okay.
Right? Turmeric has so many properties to it. And a lot of them are unheard of by common man. And they really don't need to know that, because if you're cooking with turmeric, why would you need to know what it does? But in India, it's used for a number of purposes. One of them, which is not related to cooking, is that in India, women apply paste of turmeric and sandalwood before marriage.
Do they? As
Yes.
a ritual?
As a ritual, but there is a
Right.
reason.
Yes.
Sandalwood to cleanse the body,
Yes.
turmeric for fertility.
Ah, okay.
1.2 billion people. We must have known something.
Okay, I'm going to think the Indians know something about fertility. And it's all down to turmeric. Who knew?
But the other thing, in terms of cooking,
Yes.
right? In the kitchen, turmeric is, a lot of times people say, I add turmeric for color. And my question is, why would I add turmeric for a dish that has tomatoes in it?
There's already a lot of colour.
Correct. So I would add turmeric for only one reason, and that would be to bring out the color of the rest of the ingredients. Which means turmeric acts like an antioxidant.
It's an enhancer.
It is an
like
enhancer.
salt enhances flavour,
Correct.
turmeric enhances colour.
Correct. And
Okay.
it keeps it fresh for a longer time. You make a green herb pesto, add a pinch of turmeric. see what happens to the pesto. It stays greener for a lot longer.
Because of the antioxidants.
Correct.
I love it. Okay.
So there you go.
All right. Ajoy, we could talk for years about Indian cuisine, couldn't we?
not today.
Not today, because there's so much to discuss. But I think those are really good basics and essentials to get us started on this inspiring journey. Thank you so much for being our inspiration.
Thank you very much for having me, Roberta. Always a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you, and thank you. Let's get cooking.
Absolutely. And drinking.
And drinking, food, wine, and travel.
Correct. Travel later.
Okay.